It's Priscilla Olsen here with the series Growing Up in Easton. And today I am so glad that I found this fellow on the streets of Easton. And 15 minutes ago I asked him to come over to the studio and record. This is Ivan Rosenberg, my classmate from 1960, Oliver Ames High School. And I am so excited that he's here and that he can share his childhood memories of Easton. He hasn't been back in 55 years. Wow, I'm really impressed, and we are all honored that he has made this trip to show his family his roots. So Ivan Rosenberg, welcome.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Great. Well, it's wonderful to see you. And you haven't changed a bit.
I find that hard to believe.
Well, I know. I recognized you right away some years back when you were on HGTV.
Oh, yes.
And even before the designer said, Ivan, I knew it was you, and called Kathy Burke Kelly right away, and I said, put on your television right now, and you'll see Ivan. It's wonderful that you've come back and that you treasure your hometown and are willing to appear today and share your memories, so we thank you. What are the earliest memories that you have of growing up in Easton?
Well, I remember going to the grammar school in downtown Northeastern. I don't remember a lot about it, but I remember being there. That was I don't actually remember any school before that. So that was really the first school that I remember. At the time, we were living down in Southeastern on a chicken farm, which has since been not there anymore, I think, and part of it is now the center school. But we lived in an apartment over the person that owned the farm, and every day I took a bus up to Northeastern.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And what do you remember especially about the grammar school?
Oh, well, I hadn't thought about this, but discipline. I had not been used to discipline, and it was pretty rigorous, having to do whatever we had to do, prepare for school and stuff like that. But that was my earliest memories of it, is that you had to do what people tell you to do.
And you did?
Yes, I did. I was a good student.
Yes, and that is probably the reason that when you and I graduated, we were voted by our classmates. He knows what's coming.
Yes.
Ivan and I were voted most studious. And anyway, that characterizes us, but you also had a great sense of humor, and were in the senior class play. What was something to do with a homicide?
Home Sweet Homicide, I think.
That's
something
it.
like that. I
Right.
remember sitting on I think I was sitting on a bench with the girl, and there was a lot of speculation about whether we were going to kiss or not. My memory is somewhat foggy about all this, but I know kissing publicly was not okay in those days.
Right.
That's for sure. It was a pretty straight culture at that time. Having alcohol was probably about as far out as probably like taking heroin is today, or maybe not.
I think the worst anybody ever did was have beer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Getting drunk was.
I mean,
that
you
was
and I
it.
didn't do that, but I mean, I know
No.
there were classmates who did.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. We were
Anyway,
way too
speaking
straight.
of benches.
I think it's actually funny, by the way, that here are the two that were elected most studious, and here we are both in a studio.
Oh, very funny.
Yeah.
Yes, you always were rather corny, and I always appreciated it.
Yes.
Yes, and it's great you haven't changed.
Thank you.
And but speaking of benches, I imagine that you never got to sit on Miss McFadden's white bench at the grammar school.
I do recall. Now, I think you're talking, Miss McFadden was
The principal.
In the grammar school?
Yep.
I don't think I got in trouble there, although I do remember a civics class, and with the teacher, which we finally called Little Richard.
Oh, that was John Mason.
That was who it was? And I don't remember the class, it was civics. But I remember that I did get in trouble because I really loved that civics. And there was some question he asked, and it was all multiple choice. And there was one question he asked that wasn't obvious. I mean, it wasn't, you had if you really understood the issue, you knew that there were two possible answers. And I said, well, I don't know. So I chose one of them, and it wasn't the one he wanted. And I went up to him after and said, well, you know, you could choose that one or you could do this. Well, this is the right answer. And my father went berserk. And I can't remember my interaction with little Richard, but I did end up on a bench, and he got in trouble actually because he was penalizing somebody for knowing more than he did.
Oh boy, wow.
So that was the only time. But most of the time, I was the goody two-shoes.
Yes, and so was I.
Yeah.
We were two goody two-shoes.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that was Mr. Mason was director of athletics, and so it was often he was talking more about sports than, and we could get him to talk about sports instead of civics. But I like that class too. It's something that isn't really covered in the Easton curriculum, and I think it needs to be brought back.
Civics is not?
Nope.
Unbelievable.
Nope. It's history.
Well, they covered, I know my daughters, you know, they've taken government and things like that, which you've got to understand that kind of thing.
Right.
And the problem is, I mean, there was a time when I got really interested in education and trying to improve it. My first wife was a school teacher and a principal. And, you know, I mean, the big difference that I thought in time, and the greatest teachers that I remember are the ones that taught us to think rather than to memorize data.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier, that
Right.
was?
That was, I keep remembering.
Miss Foster.
Miss Foster's English 13.
Yeah.
And English 13 was a class open only to seniors. It was non-credit. If you, it was once you dropped out, you could never get back in. And it was the last period of the day, and it was tough. It was the toughest class I ever took. And it involved really studying literature and English and writing. We went into Boston and saw plays and talked about it. It was thinking critically, and in all the, I would say in the 12 years I went to school, that was the class that I remember the most. I remember, I do remember there was a physics class, which I think was senior year, I don't remember. But during the previous summer, I had gone up to Thayer Academy, Thayer Academy, the summer school, and I learned how to use a slide rule. And so I brought the slide rule into class, and of course the other students, you may have been among them, protested that I had unfair advantage because I had this new thing called a slide rule. And he was great. I don't remember the teacher, but he was great in that he said, look, that has nothing to do with physics, that's just math, and this isn't a class on math, and if he wants to use it, and if those of you would like to learn how to use a slide rule, I'll teach a class during lunch or something like that.
Oh, how nice.
Which was, so I thought he, you know,
was that Mr.
I remember
Simpson?
the attitude. Excuse me?
Was that Mr. Simpson? He taught chemistry.
That does sound familiar, but it was a physics class
yes,
that I think I took. But it does sound like it was him. And those were the kind of things I remember academically.
And you certainly remember Val Moscato.
I definitely remember Muzzy, yes. Coach.
Yeah.
And it was great. I played football, I ran track. I think those were the two sports I was in. And there was a couple of things I learned from that, and I think it was, geez, it's been so long, I forgot. It's not until you get asked questions like this that you really remember what you learned. It's like what I remember, I was interviewed about the Boy Scouts once, and I had forgotten the fundamental lessons, and you know, I just remembered I played football. But what I got from Muzzy was to go beyond what I felt in the moment. When you're out there playing, we played both ways in those days. So we played both defense and offense, and that doesn't mean we didn't get a rest and the exchange. But most of the time, if you were first string, you played the whole game, most of the whole game, and you're pretty tired. And we played in some lousy weather. We were also well, what I learned from him was it didn't make any difference what you felt. You know, you felt tired, you hurt. you had a job to do, and you had to go do that job. And I also learned to be competitive wasn't personal. You could go out there and really play hard against somebody else, and then you go out and be friends. And that in the world of business, people often forget that. That if you're really interested in being the best you can be, you got to have competition.
Good point.
You won't do it by yourself.
Right.
You look at these great Olympic athletes, and almost many of them train with their best competitor, the one that they need to beat. And they train together because only by training with somebody great will you be able to be great. And there was something about being with Muzzy that, I didn't like practicing. I didn't like staying in shape. I didn't like any of that stuff. And yet, we did all those things. And I remember he wanted me to be a miler. And I said, no, that's way too long. I don't want to hurt for 6 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever the heck it was. So I went the 100-yard dash. I figured, okay. I told him the medals that you get for the 100-yard dash are exactly the same as the medals you get for the mile. So I ran the mile and the 220, and the 220 hurt. You were hurting, and I learned how to go through pain in that, which was very useful for me. I went to Cornell afterwards, and I rode crew for 4 years. Oh. And talk about avoiding the mile. Crew is just like the mile. It's even worse because you're. Crew is a whole different thing. It's a unique sport.
It's endurance, it's perseverance,
yeah.
And I think those were the qualities that Muzzy instilled in us, and also the heart issues. The soul, respecting the other side, and getting along with and teamwork. Right, you're part of a team, and don't try to be a big shot and stick out.
Oh yeah, that was absolutely a big thing. I wasn't one of the big guys. In fact, the only person I remember from the class before us was Budgie Campbell.
Oh yeah.
But it was his group were these spectacular athletes, and particularly on the football field. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what the actual record was, but I recall they were essentially undefeated for 4 years.
Right.
So the rest of us were second string, and then so they were all the heroes. And the next year, we were all who had been second string, all of a sudden got to be first string, and everybody was gunning for us that year. This was the memory that I remember the most, was the Thanksgiving Day game.
Oh boy.
And Charlie Peterson had been our class president, had been killed in an auto accident the year before. Paul Kelly had taken over as president. And we created the Charlie Peterson Memorial Trophy as the winner of that game, for the winner of that game. Now, Randolph, the year before, had gotten so tired of losing the Thanksgiving Day game that they had said they weren't going to play us anymore. I don't know why we set this up the way we set it up, but in any case, we went into, my recollection is, we went into that Thanksgiving Day game with a record of 4-4, and against Randolph, who had all states. They were all-state quarterback, all-state halfback. I think I may have made an honorable mention as the right tackle but we were not up to Budgie Campbell, and everybody was out after us. And I do remember that game, and my recollection is we won 16-8.
Wow.
And
do you think part of it was because you were doing it for Charlie as well?
Yeah, there was no way we were going to not win that trophy.
Yeah.
I mean, I still feel it today.
Yeah.
That's why we talk about team, and we talk about going beyond. That's why that game, I remember it.
Yeah.
So well.
Much.
There was just we were maniacs. I mean, there was just no way. And of course, but our skill wasn't, our passion was more than our skill. And we were playing against a team that had skill, but didn't have the passion that we had.
So it takes both, and I think
Oh, yeah.
Muzzy taught you guys that you need both, and
Yeah,
and you had tremendous camaraderie too, as I recall.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have said that at the time. You know, I just was,
Yeah.
it's very interesting that looking back at that,
Right.
I can see that.
So what else did you learn growing up in Easton that helped you with your career? And your career choices and some of the decisions you made along the way?
Well, the most significant decision was, so the Ames Free Library was a huge impact on my life. I read voraciously, and I remember we were confined to the children's section of the library,
Yeah.
but the science fiction was in the adult section, and I'm a science fiction nut. And so they gave me special permission. But here's the significant day. So, there was a couple of us that were book fanatics. We were going to junior high school. Is that the yellow building?
Yep.
Yep. So we're going to junior high school, which is very close to the library. And of course, we read almost everything. And this one day, well, we knew that there was a new shipment of books coming in. So the librarian knew us well. And she said, there's a new shipment of books coming in on this day. So we could barely stay in school that day. And the end of the day, 3 or 4 of us ran to the library. I mean, I can remember, we ran because we wanted, whoever got there first pick. And I'm running down, which you're not supposed to do in the library, but I'm running down the aisle of the library. And off to the right, I see this shiny green cover, which looked to me like it was a new book. I had no idea what it was, and I grabbed it 2 seconds before whoever else I was running with. And it was the boys' first book of radio and electronics.
No way.
And that was it.
That was it.
That became my hobby. I became a radio amateur. I went to Cornell in electrical engineering, went on to computer science, and even though thereafter, for my doctorate and all, I got more into the people side, and my consulting today is more the people side. I consult in aerospace and defense primarily, and primarily the people I'm working with are engineers. And the fact that I have that engineering mentality,
Right.
that I think like an engineer, has made me really successful. I was the most successful consultant at Jet Propulsion Lab. I worked there as a consultant for close to 15 years. I did the culture change there. I trained over 1,300 people.
Wow.
And I mean, they were people who had 100 people waitlisted for my class. Because I took the people skills, which I had learned, but I was able to speak them in engineering, because I thought like engineer.
Right.
And it all started with that book.
Yeah.
And it started with that library. And that,
Wow.
I don't know what gave me the love of reading. Maybe it was my parents. But here's this small town of 7,000 people. And we had one of the most magnificent libraries.
Right.
And in a phenomenal building, which is still there. And with people, and it was free, and that was, it was an amazing resource. I mean, I got to learn about the world. I remember I got interested in the Civil War, and there were books, and I could go up and read about the Civil War.
Well, and now at the Historical Society, the Depot, I pointed out William Chafin's book. Now, he was the pastor at the Unity Church, and he during the 1880s, I think 1886, he published this book, and it talks about the earliest settlers and everything from 1886 on back. And it's a fabulous, fabulous book, and there are so many wonderful stories. And it's amazing how many people, wonderful people who were inventors and they were in the frontier of so many different activities and ventures and industries from Easton. It wasn't just the Ameses, and I think that book makes us remember the doctors and the engineers and the other people, the writers and other people who have gone on and made a national impact. So, you know, we tend to, when we were growing up, it was all about the Ameses, but there are many other families who contributed magnificently also, and you'll get to read about that in that book.
Good,
It's
I
a
look forward to it.
wonderful resource.
I think there's something unique about Easton. And I don't know, I've never lived in any other small town. But we weren't an ordinary town. I think the Ames made us special.
Yep.
And the resources that we have here made us special.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the reasons why we come back. It's not...
And also, I think it's a big reason why most of us were very independent and self-sufficient and became very successful. Maybe not always financially successful, but successful in whatever profession we chose, because we had that. Well, we had that respect for our roots, and we wanted to honor that. And it was almost the same respect that we had for our parents, that we wouldn't want to do anything that would dishonor them.
Yes.
Oh no! And the same with the town. We're very proud, and I think that was a great beginning for many of us.
Yeah, I think interesting what you say, because I think there was respect of the students by the teachers.
Yes, but also
I mean,
respect by the students of the teachers.
Right? There was this mutual
respect.
Yeah, we didn't like everybody, and all that, but there was. I don't ever remember being put down. I mean, but like English 13 and stuff like that. I remember being inspired rather than put down, and whatever you did was okay, but I never felt disrespected.
No,
and
no.
that was. So I came out of this town, definitely, I can do whatever I want to do. And my father gave me that a lot, too.
Yeah.
I realized, I actually told him that. I was with him the week before he died, and I was going through, okay, what do I need to say? And one of the things I said to him was, one of the things I got from him, and it may have come from the town as well, was I can do anything I want to do if I want to do it badly enough. The limits are not coming from the outside. And I didn't see any limits here either. It was all up to you. You want to earn money? There were ways to earn money. There was, and you're right about the independence. I mean, it was a safer world then too. But me and my guys, we would go to the woods on the other end of Bridge Street and play for hours in the woods. And we were completely on our own, and we'd go to the park, and I don't know that you can do that now. I don't know anything about Easton, but certainly where I live, it's less. You're less able to do that.
Yeah, well, you're in LA, but on the outskirts, right?
Yes, right.
Well, today we have helicopter parents, we call them. They hover over their kids. Even if there's just a block or two to walk when they get off the school bus, the parents are there either with their cars or without, waiting at the corner to escort their children home. It gets kind of ridiculous. And as a result, the children are not as independent and self-sufficient and don't have this, in many ways, don't have the same, they may be independent according to today's standards, but they don't at all compete with the way we were.
Maybe.
No. And I remember I've told this before on the show, I remember being 8 years old and going to Fred's Pond to go skating. And my sister was 7, my late sister Karen was 7, and my mother said 2 things. Look both ways when you cross Main Street, and don't skate near the thin ice.
Right.
Now, can you imagine a parent of an 8-year-old and a 7-year-old today saying that, let alone, I mean, they would always accompany them and be watching and careful and all. And we'd meet all our friends, neighborhood and classmates, would all meet up there. And the boathouse is still there that we would change our skates on. And yeah, so it was, we had an advantage in that regard. And it is a different world today. So we have to give that. But we got so much. Now tell me, what did you do in the winter as a kid growing up?
For fun? Well, I shoveled sidewalk. I earned money.
Yeah.
We shoveled driveways. I delivered the Sunday paper. That I do remember from O'Connor's?
O'Connor's New Store.
Yep.
You picked up the Enterprise, right? The Brockton Enterprise?
Yep. The Sunday paper. I had a wagon, a wooden wagon. I think they provided that. And we would bundle up the papers on the wagon on Sunday morning. I remember the winter time particularly. And we each had our own route, and we would deliver the papers and come back, and then we would get paid for however many papers we had delivered. I can't remember, there was something in it. I always suspected whether the counting was accurate or not. I don't know.
Now that's when you lived on Center Street.
I lived on Center Street my entire time, other than that time in Southeastern.
I see. Yeah, and that was right across from the Stone House at the corner of Park and Center.
Yep. Now, my best friend there, Colin Farrell, I think. I don't remember. Colin something or other lived in that Stone House.
I see.
But and he was my best friend. And he was 1 year ahead of me, I think.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So the neighborhood kids, huh?
Yeah. He was even more intellectual than I was. And then, God, I can't remember the names of the people that we would go off into the woods with, but that was our big thing, cowboys and Indians in those days, or whatever we made up. We would make up some game, and that was the thing. We were able to make up games. I mean, TV came along in the late 50s. At least we got a TV.
Well, I think my family got it in 49.
Okay, maybe.
But we were the only ones in the neighborhood.
Yeah, it was in the 50s somewhere.
Early 50s, yeah.
And so most of the time we were ourselves. So let's see. So there was that, sidewalks, sledding, and I also learned how to play the piano. So I had that.
Who was your teacher?
I don't remember.
Was it Molly McNamara?
I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember.
Yeah. Do you still play today?
Not much. No. I can play, but I don't. We don't have a piano in the house anymore. But I plan to get an electric from my daughter, and maybe I'll pick it up again.
Good. And how about the summertime? What did you do in the summer?
God, Boy Scouts.
Oh yeah, tell us about that. I remember. Didn't you become a Eagle Scout?
Yeah, I was an Eagle.
I know. You're the only one I remember.
Yeah. No. In fact, it's not only was an Eagle. I am an Eagle. There's a difference.
Oh.
And I was president of the Boy Scout Council at one point, and I was on a national council up until recently. For every other badge within the first class and the second class and the Star in Life, that's an award that you earn. Mm-hmm. But an Eagle is different. It's almost like once you're president of the United States, you're always president of the United States, and how you behave reflects on the presidency.
Yeah, the institution.
You aren't you anymore.
Right.
You're more than that. And it's the same with Eagles. Once you're an Eagle, that's you now be something different, and your behavior now reflects on other Eagles.
I see.
And when they say you're an Eagle Scout, they don't say you're a Life Scout or a Star Scout or whatever. They distinguish those who have accomplished Eagle. Mm-hmm. And it really is different, and it carries its own responsibility. And it was work. I remember the last badge I had to get was had something to do with athletics. I don't remember, but that was my last badge. And you had to get a basketball through the hoop a certain number of times in a certain number of minutes. And that was during the winter that I actually got that. And I'm out there, and I had cleared the snow about the basketball court and practice. And I found it was the hardest thing I had to do. I got everything else done. But during the summer, I'd go to Camp Squanto.
Oh, yeah.
Down in Plymouth area, Plymouth Plantations, whatever they called it. And I was there as a scout for many years, and then I was there as a counselor for a number of years until I left the area.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So I was involved in Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts first, and all the way through, and that was also a major impact on my life.
Now, wasn't your mother a Cub Scout leader?
Yeah, I'm sure she was.
Yeah.
I'm sure she was a den mother.
A den mother, right.
Yes, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I don't remember specifically, but that would be my mother.
See, I remember your mother very fondly. I do. She was tall, brunette, and had a very sweet smile, and she was a great lady.
She was one of those women. Had she been born today or in this generation, she would have had a career.
Right.
She would have been a leader. She was really smart. But she grew up in a time when women were take home and family, and their first job was taking care of the kids and cooking and taking care of the house.
Yep.
And they weren't supposed to be smarter or bigger than their husbands. And she did pretty well, given that society limitation.
Yeah. And it's,
I remember when she wore pants for the first time, and that was a big deal. She was that was her she was a feminist, but in many ways, just did great in bringing me up. Although I did have also the impact of all of us growing up at that time, which was for at least us males, when we did something wrong, wait till your father comes home.
oh, right.
So that
And
was
your father was a dentist.
he was DDS actually. He was a doctor of dental surgery,
I see.
and which meant he actually did surgery over at Brockton Hospital, but he had his own practice. And when he got old enough and decided to retire, he moved to Florida, and he went on and got a master's, I think, in gerontology. He said that was the one field where they couldn't hold his age against him. So he did much research in that area.
Is that right?
Interesting guy.
Yeah.
Right up to the day he died.
Yeah. And I know my mother she's in the Oliver Ames Hall of Fame, Athletic Hall of Fame.
Ah.
And, that's where she excelled. And I think women in her day, like your mother, had to choose other fields besides
Yes.
professions. But the same with my mother. If she had lived today, she would have been a CEO. She was the one that taught me how to write. She was really very, very smart too. And I think about that, but I became a feminist also and worked very hard in the 60s. That was one of the three movements, if you remember, the civil rights, the anti-war, and the women's rights. So and that led me to go to law school, because as a school teacher, and I was lobbying at the State House, and this is in Michigan, I wasn't taken very seriously. Oh, just a country little teacher. And a friend of mine whom I had been her campaign manager and won on a write-in for the first time in the history of Michigan, she went to law school. So I thought, okay, I can get some credibility here, and in terms of the issues that I thought were important. So, in life, there are always circumstances and people that influence the direction and the choices that one makes. And I think in your case, you, when you got your master's at Rensselaer, was it Rensselaer Polytech?
No, Cornell.
It was at Cornell. You got your master's. Then you got your PhD at Rensselaer.
At University of Rochester.
Oh, Rochester, University of Rochester. And what was that in?
Business. My PhD is in business.
Right, it's in business.
Business management.
Right. So you combined your engineering background and that was a springboard for your future in being a coach and so forth. So tell us a little bit about that. What do you do?
What do I do today?
Do you go into a corporation that has a problem with employees, motivating them, or has a financial need, or what are the kinds of needs that you directly deal with and impact on?
Well, it's generally, so what we do that is different than we're management consultants. And what we do is we help our clients solve problems that look difficult or impossible. We only do what's called breakthroughs. We don't do any incremental stuff. So we do, somebody couldn't figure out, it was a project, the client was willing to pay $15 million. My client couldn't figure out how to do it for less than 20.
Okay.
Which was going to be a real problem.
Right.
They weren't going to get it, and we helped them figure out how to do it for 14.2. Wow. So that, to cut it 25% off without cutting the capability. There's generally three things we do. We do a specific problem like that, which really got us into aerospace, because where I live, NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab is about 20 minutes away. And I got introduced in there, and I taught them how to produce breakthroughs, and that's the kind of thing they're always dealing with. There's a whole funny story about that. And then the second thing we deal with is helping people work together. So like you mentioned, where employees are not getting along well, where they need to build a team, where they're having relationships with another company, all the things that get in the way of people not working well together. And then the third thing we do is coach and train people, executives and leaders, how to have their people produce breakthroughs. So I've trained probably about 4,500 people, something like that.
Wow.
And that's just the training part, not counting the other kind of work that I do. I've probably done strategic planning for probably over 100 organizations.
Wow. So are these, do you ever do work for non-for-profits?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of times. And I've been on the board of not-for-profits, and generally what they call me in for is the same kind of work I do for profits. Some not-for-profit is either having arguments inside, or is not clear how they're going to get to the next step, or whatever their issue is. And that's generally the kind of stuff I either help them with, either as a consultant or as on the board.
And what would you say, looking back, what was the most important thing you learned here growing up in Easton that impacted your career and the kind of work that you do? What has made you, what values, or what, can we say, impacted your success right now, as you're still working, I understand?
Well, oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'll work till the
Right.
day I die.
Exactly.
Because it's not work for me.
Yeah.
I think what comes to mind when you ask that question, and it relates a little bit to the thing you said before, I'm a change agent. And I think our whole class has that kind of, we grew up in a time when change was clearly needed, and we were determined to make that change. The three movements you mentioned, civil rights and women's movement and the war in Vietnam, people had strong opinions
Really?
about on both sides on those things, and we cared. I don't know what got us into it, but we cared, and we were going to do something about it. I don't know how the other class members are, but certainly as a generation, that generation that came out, we were the ones that went out and paraded. There were people that gave their lives
Right.
for what they believed in, and you don't see parades today.
No.
You don't see the same kind of thing. The generations today, I think particularly the millennial, and I've done a lot of studying of generations. So we're the boomer generation.
Oh, we are.
And the characteristic of the boomer generation is, what we did in our research is we were able to get the worldview of each generation down to a single sentence.
Really?
So, and by the way, the generations cycle. So there's only 4 types of generations, and they cycle around over and over and over again. And each cycle of 4 generations is about 80 to 100 years, and each generation is about 20 to 25 years. The silent generation, their worldview is, let's compromise. Let's take the best from everybody and put it together. And that's the generation being born now as well. The generation we were in, the boomers, our worldview is what's important are my values, and I cannot compromise. In large part, the Congress of today is being dominated by boomers. And there's boomers on the left and there's boomers on the right. And George Bush was a boomer president, and so was Clinton. You know, values generated, and I can't compromise them. The most extreme view of that is, the most public view is the Tea Party. I think it's called
Yeah, Tea Party on the right.
Yeah, that's on the right. That's an example of that kind of view. And there's people on the left that have the same kind of thing. It's not the left or right. And the Gen Xers who were born after us, their view is what's important are my own goals, you know, and they don't. The rest of it's a con, and they're very individualistic. And then the millennials, who were born early 80s to early 2000s, are let's change the world together. So the millennials and the boomers have a lot of similarities. The difference is that the boomers come from right, wrong. We had right, you know, if you remember, if you weren't against the war, you were wrong.
Right.
If you weren't for civil rights, you were wrong. If you weren't for women's, you know, freedom and rights, you were wrong. I mean, and you were them.
Yeah.
And it was an us versus them time.
There was no gray.
No gray at all. And you know, and there were people that assassinated people. We lived through.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we all remember where we were when Kennedy was assassinated.
Absolutely.
And the personal, we took it personally.
Right. We did.
He was our president.
Right. And the same with Martin Luther King.
Martin Luther King and RFK to a great extent.
And RFK too, yeah.
I mean, it was, and you moving along. We were making progress, and then all of a sudden, something like that would happen, and it just pulled the rug out, and you had to get back up again.
Right, and we did.
And we did.
Yeah.
And I think so. What I got, there was something about that, and I don't know that I could point to what there was about the town, but it certainly put out a bunch of us in that year at least that were up to making a difference and felt we could.
Yes, and felt we could.
Yes.
And that we needed to. It was a.
Oh, yes, very much so.
Yeah, it was a compelling need.
Yes.
It was something that we couldn't think about our personal goals. It was something we had to do for the country and for just the freedoms that we felt were important.
And that's really, I mean, I think that sense of ethics and what's right and what's wrong, it pervades us. I mean, this was a trip that we had planned a year ago, to the four of us, my wife and my two kids, to go on this trip exactly, to go up to Albany and come across and visit Easton and to be back here and share this town with my family. And we were in Albany, and my father-in-law ran into some medical issues, and my wife, just for good reason, decided to stay and be with him and help him. And we needed to move on. We had already had the hotels paid for, and I didn't want the kids stuck in Albany for the entire week.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see Easton. And she was, her initial reaction, aren't you mad? Aren't you angry that I'm not with you? And I said, no, I'm disappointed. Clearly, I'd love to have you here, but you're where you're supposed to be.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm not bragging about myself, but I think there was a sense of ethics, that it's that value.
Yes, right.
That's the thing.
Right.
It's the value that enables us to handle stuff.
And make the right choices.
Yeah, right choices is, I think it's, I mean, it depends on what our values are, but I certainly feel like it does. I mean, why would I get angry at her for doing,
right.
Disappointment is one thing.
Right.
But anger, that would say she's doing the wrong thing, and she's not. She's doing exactly the right thing, even though it doesn't work out the way I think it should. And I think those are the kind of values that we had. And we went into, we were a cusp generation in a large part between the silence and the boomers.
Right.
The silence where that's compromise, and we came in no compromise. How could I compromise civil rights?
Right.
I mean, what? What, we're going to discriminate just a little bit?
Right. And then also then, we were, even though we were raised in a town that had really only one black family, and that was the Hineses. And I recently realized that Pat Hines was in my late sister Corin's class. She was a year behind us. And, but I knew her sister Eleanor, who was a year ahead. She was in the class of '59. Because we sang in the chorus together. And Miss Ashley, who was the only African-American teacher in the system, I mean, she was wonderful, and we all loved her.
Yep.
And anyway,
the variety shows that we put on. I remember the football team put on we did Dancing in the Tulips or something like that.
Oh, no kidding.
And we all, and so all the particularly the line, we got dressed up in tutus and stuff like that.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
And there was we picked some kid who was the smallest, skinniest kid, and he was the tulip or something like that.
Yeah.
And we were dancing. Oh, yeah, we had.
Well, she was a lot of fun. And
the question is, how much could we get away with in that variety show before she clamped? And she actually gave us a lot of latitude. But,
right. She was someone who appreciated humor and good fun, and she was a wonderful chorus director. But I remember that was the only black family in town.
And we were one of two Jewish families.
And you were, yeah. And so I remember after I graduated college and was sort of out in the world, that I really, and I got involved in the civil rights movement. That was when I enlarged my family of friends and included blacks. And my best friend today is a African-American living in San Diego. She's from Chicago originally, and one of the dearest people in my life. But that freed me in a way.
Yeah.
The values that we learned in Easton freed me up to expand my horizons and my relationships. So
there was something in our conversation that just struck me, and because I've always said this about Easton, I felt safe, and this was a community. I felt taken care of here. You know?
yes,
I
don't think there was discrimination here.
No, no,
Not with us.
There was not at all. But I'm beyond the differences. I never felt it made any difference that I was Jewish. In fact, I went to the Unitarian Church for a while, and we all shared. It wasn't that, but I'm saying the town. I felt safe and taken like a cocoon or something in the town. That I'm sure that if I was a kid, walked downtown and something happened to me, everybody would do whatever they could do to take care of me. It wouldn't make any difference.
Exactly.
I felt like I was safe here.
Well, I think the community was like a family.
Yes, exactly.
And it was an extended family. And the police, for example, were the same. I didn't realize until I interviewed Lee Anderson, whose father was Freddie Anderson, the cop, that they would, if somebody was caught and drinking and driving, they'd put him in the back of the cruiser, take the keys away, put him in the back of the cruiser, and not go to the station.
Right, take them to the
Take them home.
Right,
and
exactly.
on the way, give the lecture from hell.
Right.
And then when they got home, they got the discipline from hell.
I remember.
And that's how they took care of, as Lee said, we took care of our own.
Yes.
We took care of our own. And those youngsters never repeated. It was that kind of, you didn't see them driving, drinking ever again.
Right.
Because it was this family that cared, and there was such respect for that.
I think that gave us, when we talked a few minutes ago about going out and changing the world, that gave us, I think there was something to coming, my kids aren't coming from that kind of environment. There's no small town. There's no town where we are. And but coming from Easton, a town, and this kind of town, and I don't know whether you're going to get into your questions, but I'd love to talk about what it looks like to me today, coming back after 55 years.
Okay. Go right ahead, because I don't have any questions.
Oh.
I have a lot of questions, depending on what you say.
Well, I think it's what's interesting to me is, we had a little bit of correspondence before I came back. And in fact, a number of people kept saying, oh, it's changed a lot. It's changed a lot. You'll be surprised at all the changes. And I wasn't. There's some new buildings, but the town, to me, has the same kind of feeling as I remember when I grew up. It's there. In fact, in many ways, it's better. The depot is extraordinary. The shovel works. The buildings still look the same, and yet there's something new inside. But they didn't look that good when I was here. The town is clean. You drive around and you still get this. This is a place where people live.
Right.
And it's not junky. It's not trashy.
No.
It's people are taking care of it. I don't know. I get that feeling, and that's what was important to me in coming back here, was to see those places, that it was where it was safe to grow up, and the people were proud of living here, and it was truly a community.
Right.
And to me, I still get that feeling when I come back.
Well, good. I was away for 44 years, and I came back 12 years ago, and I had the same feeling.
Yeah.
And it's just like I never left.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful to be a townie,
Well,
there are privileges.
Yeah.
Because you can speak with a little bit more authority, and you remember a lot. Not that we remember much that happened yesterday, but we do remember what happened in the past.
Yeah.
And
it was surprising to me, the house that I grew up in, it looks just the same.
Yep.
It looks exactly the same as it did when
And it's still painted white.
Still painted white with a red door.
Yep.
The only thing that's different is the barn's not there anymore.
Yes.
So the barn was in back, and now it's a big open field,
Space.
that I could say.
Well, listen, Ivan, I know you've got to get to lunch at the Farmer's Daughter. Yep, you still have time
Good.
to get there. Is there anything else you want to say? Especially to your classmates?
Well, I'm delighted to be back in touch. I didn't realize how much I had missed it and how much there was here.
Yeah.
I've actually appreciated the interview because it had me think about things I hadn't thought about, like where did I get who I am today?
Yeah.
And how much this town meant. I mean, just the fact that on this trip, it was important for me to come back here. Mm-hmm. You know, and this day was important too.
Well, it's wonderful to see you, and
Thank
it's
you.
been great for all of us. Now some of us are going to meet at the Chateau in Norton tonight for supper, and so we'll reminisce some more.
I bet.
But I want to thank you again.
My pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
You're so
great.
welcome. And so Ivan Rosenberg, Oliver Ames class of 1960, star defensive tackle and offensive tackle, entrepreneur extraordinaire. Thank you so much. And thank you, listeners at home. We hope that you have enjoyed this interview, growing up in Easton, as much as we have enjoyed doing it. Thank you again. And until next time, bye-bye.